Alright, everybody, what's up? Hello and welcome. And I just had to do it. I couldn't help myself. Had to talk about this Epstein stuff too. Because everyone else is talking about it right now. So, from what I read on this article, it started to trip me out when I seen some of these photos. I'm trying to post some of these photos on here. Okay. So, to understand what's happening today, we need to go back to 1972 to the eugenics movement. The eugenics movement was established in the US. It quickly spread to Germany. California eugenicists began promoting eugenics and sterilization and sent it to Germany. And these German scientists and medical professionals, probably the Nazis. By 1933, California had subjected more people to forceful sterilization than all other U.S. states combined. The forced sterilization program engineered by the Nazis were inspired by California's program. The Rockefeller Foundation helped fund the German eugenics program and even funded the program that Josef Mengele, the Nazi angel of death, worked on before he went to Auschwitz. Mengele saw the opportunity to conduct genetic research on human subjects. His subsequent experiments focused primarily on twins, with little regard for health or safety of the victims, and most died. Mengele had an obsession with twins and had 1,500 sets to experiment on in Auschwitz. Mengele also engaged in many other disturbing experiments on humans at Auschwitz, most to do with women's reproduction and eugenics, all barbaric. It would seem that this war had another sinister purpose. Other than making money for the cabal, the World War supplied the Rockefellers and eugenics with countless human subjects to experiment on. The Angel of Death, as Mengele was called, was funded by the Rockefeller family. Why the focus on twins? Think mirror. Nazi human experimentation. The Nazis called their eugenics program racial hygiene. California's eugenic researcher Harry H. Laughlin often bragged that this was his model for eugenic sterilization, and that laws had been implemented in the 1935 Nuremberg racial hygiene laws. Would you be shocked to know that Harry Laughlin was part of Margaret Sanger's elite circle of friends, eugenics program, and Planned Parenthood? During the 1930s, a scientist by the name of Cornelius Packard Rhodes with the Rockefeller Institute specialized in anemia and leukemia, working for 6 months in Puerto Rico in 1932 as part of the Rockefeller Foundation International Health Board contingent. During World War II, Cornelius worked for the United States Army, helping to develop chemical weapons and set up research centers. Research on mustard gas led to developments for its use in chemotherapy at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City. Following World War II, the U.S. took in 1,600 German scientists under the CIA program Operation Paperclip. Ex-scientist Werner von Braun and his V-2 rocket team between 1945 and 1959. Many were former members and some were former leaders of the Nazi regime. It was a covert program through the CIA and U.S. government under the guise of advancing space and military technology. It would give the U.S. advantage over the Soviet Union, who had also taken in 2,200 German specialists. Another medical investment, the Rockefellers started was the Memorial Hospital, founded on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in 1884, the first cancer research fund in the country. The first fellowship training program in the U.S. was created at Memorial in 1927, funded by the Rockefellers. In 1931, the powerful 900 V X-ray tube was put into use in radiation-based cancer treatment at Memorial. The tube had been given by GE over the several years. In 1934, John D. Rockefeller Jr. donated land on York Avenue for a new location. 2 years later, he granted Memorial Hospital $3 million, and the hospital began their move across town in 1939. In 1945, the chairman of GM, Alfred P. Sloan, donated $4 million to create the Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research. Through his Sloan Foundation, and Charles F. Kettering, GM's VP, agreed to oversee the cancer research program using industrial techniques. In 1948, Cornelius P. Rhodes became the director of Memorial. Rhodes had run chemical weapons programs for the U.S. Army in World War II and had been involved in the work that led to the discovery that nitrogen mustards could potentially be used as cancer drugs. In 1964, Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital, a facility known for serving elderly and disabled population, was conducting cancer experiments on unsuspecting non-cancerous patients. The experiments were the idea of Dr. Chester Sotham, a noted immunologist at Sloan Kettering Hospital. By 1980, Memorial Hospital and the Sloan Kettering Institute formally merged into a singular entity under the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center name. Vice President George Bush Sr. spoke at the official groundbreaking ceremonies for the Sloan Kettering laboratories on June 24, 1986. Questions emerged over the years about Memorial Sloan's ethics when it came to research. MSK was caught selling tissue samples and patient data to Page Al, unknown to patients. In addition to Al's research, cloning of cells and DNA, one can only imagine what other kind of covert programs have been developed since the Rockefellers started their research a century ago. The Rockefellers had the assistance of the Nazi performing human experimentation during and after World War II with Operation Paperclip. To understand how much technology has been suppressed, let's focus on what we do know about Sloan Kettering medical breakthroughs using cloning technology. Research led by investigators at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center has shown that therapeutic cloning, also known as somatic cell nuclear transfer, can be used to treat Parkinson's disease in mice, transforming Sloan Kettering viruses generated by the cloned V. gene by in vitro and in vivo recombinations. Monoclonal antibody. What programs are reserved for just the elites, but not us feeders or sheep? Does the cabal still perform live human experimentation? Where would they get their live human test subjects? Did it end after World War II, or did they just have to become more creative? WAPO, or WAPO, some years ago to discount human cloning. After world about a fanatic group claiming to have successfully cloned the first human. The Washington Post received commentary from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute. This is a chance to educate the audience about the nature of credible evidence, said Harold Varmus, president of the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, and a vocal proponent of full disclosure of scientific data. Yep, they're doing it. Many famous people have been treated for cancer at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Former President Carter, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, treated at MSK with a miracle recovery. How do these elite live to be over 80 and barely look a day over 30? The other famous person treated at the Memorial Sloan Kettering was George H.W. and Barbara Bush's daughter, Pauline Robinson Bush. This is where things will take an odd turn. The Bush family is a family with deep, dark secrets. Members of the secret society Skull and Bones, which also had a fascination with eugenics and Nazism. So what does all of this have to do with Jeffrey Epstein, you might ask? Now that we have a foundation for what I'm about to theorize, grab your popcorn and it's gonna be a bumpy ride. While digging, I didn't see a lot of information directly tying Epstein to the Bush family. There are indirect ties to the Bush family through Les Wexner, Mossad. Epstein operated in Florida on Jeb's watch, and through Poppy Bush and George W. Bush terms. The evidence provided so far suggests Epstein is Mossad. There's also been evidence he is affiliated with the CIA, MOS, and MI6. What if he is affiliated with all of them? An asset, but of what sort? The cabal is clearly in charge of all three-letter agencies, and they work collectively. All three have the same cabal New World Order goal. We know of Poppy Bush's CIA history. He's committed unimaginable crimes against humanity. We also know of the cabal's obsession with bloodlines. We've seen their tactics to reproduce and place offspring into families as Manchurian candidates. With learning about are you beginning to see the 40,000 foot view? So, Marina Abramovic is also involved heavily in the occult, human consciousness, and rituals. Do clones have souls? If not, how would they get them? What about test tube babies? Replicated DNA? Coincidentally, Marina Abramovic owns a house in Malden Bridge, New York, in the shape of a six-pointed star called Star House. What is spirit cooking really all about? A six-pointed star also symbolized Satan or Saturn, Moloch, in Canaanite times. Marina's star home is a 25-minute drive from Albany, New York, the headquarters for the NXIVM. Also not far from Manhattan when mapping it on Google Maps. It's close to a town called Canaan. Jeffrey Epstein was born January 20th, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York to Jewish parents, Pauline and Seymour Epstein. He has a brother named Mark Pauline. Let me try that again. He has a brother named Mark. Pauline was a homeowner and a school aide. Seymour worked in the New York Department of Parks and Rec as a groundskeeper. While looking into the Bush family, I began researching each of Bush's children. I came across a child that looked like the one that George and Barbara lost to leukemia. Her full name was Pauline Robin Bush. Her birth date was December 20th, 1949. She passed away on October 11th, 1953. The Bush family stated her body was donated to science. On the advance of George's uncle, John M. Walker, president of Memorial Hospital in New York City, they brought Robin to the Sloan Kettering Institute. He told George and Barbara that you could never live with yourselves unless you treat her. If this isn't odd enough, Robin passed in 1953, and Epstein was born in 1953 in the same city. Robin's full name is Pauline Robinson Bush. Epstein's mother's name is Pauline. When speaking about Robin, George H. Bush commented she was good with math. A 3-year-old? All coincidences, I'm sure. In addition, there have been some odd things about Epstein's physique. The internet claims he's 6 foot tall. He has other weird attributes like his teeth and something else shaped like an egg. Warning. Please do not listen to this video with young ones present. Reconstruction, something else. Regardless of your opinion on this topic, it's clear we're being deceived in some fashion. Other bizarre coincidences with doppelgangers. If you're not a believer in clones, that's okay. At the very least, there's no denying these individuals come from the same gene pool or bloodline. However, that's accomplished. The elite are obsessed with bloodlines and eugenics. And then they show a bunch of these photos where they have Justin Trudeau right next to Fidel Castro, but his face looks exactly like it. Then you got Aleister Crowley next to Barbara Bush, striking similarity. Rod Ronstein, a Nazi SS, looks exactly like this Heinrich Himmler. And then you got this Robert Mueller who looks like Heinrich Mueller. They even say looks like Adolf Hitler. What are they trying to say, that those people were cloned? So after I read that article and I looked at those crazy photos, then I started to come up with my own kind of theory, I guess you could say. So Epstein was trying to figure out life extension technology and spoke of trying to cryogenically freeze his own head and his schlong. He even helped to fund research of the cloning institute called Cloneaid. By using his black market sex operations to fund the secret facilities and various dungeons around the world, he was also trying to harvest stem cells in order to create a human embryo so he could clone humans. Michael Jackson was really interested in cloning research, and that many celebrities have been investing in the technology. There is also this virus that is named after Epstein and is the Epstein-Barr virus that has links to HIV. So Epstein could have been helping fund and create biolabs and gain-of-function research also, trying to create a superhuman species that was superior to today's Homo sapiens, that you could make your eyes see the way a cat might have night vision or have gorilla-type strength by altering genes or inserting new ones. This whole thing about Epstein seems like he was the guy who was able to compromise governments and officials to allow his sex ring to operate so that he could fund these black budget eugenics and transhumanist science labs, giving the scientists what they want in order for them to operate clandestine experimentation on humans to create clones, viruses, stem cells, and vaccines that use CRISPR technology with mRNA. There could be a whole slew of people who are clones who are among us now that we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. That cloning humans could bring back someone from the grave, even from back in time if you had their DNA. You could have a body double that will let you get off scot-free while your double takes the fall. They are even saying that males could have babies that was 100% related to both parents if they cloned a baby for two gay parents. So this is what they have been hiding under all of the sex operations, is the fact that they circumvented the law and nature to create human clones. There is a rapper named Kid Buu who claims to be the son of a clone, and that many people in Hollywood and the music industry are clones or related to one. There are some eerily uncanny photos of side-by-side pictures of notable figures from the past and today with striking resemblance. There's got to be some kind of design to all of this. There are those who postulate that we are by design flawed in our makeup, and that there must be something done. The fact that we once had 12 strands of DNA and now only have 2 leaves a lot of room for improvement, and that we were stripped of the other 10 strands by aliens who did not want us to be powerful. And so this may be when aliens have decided to push humanity toward becoming a non-sexual clone race that does not reproduce, in order to try and further meddle with our genes to fix their first mistake. It seems as though maybe the only way to save the human race from itself would be to make us less powerful. The ability to multiply beyond control is a threat to other civilizations. When they see how violent and greedy we are and compulsory to our sexual impulses, I feel as though aliens are threatened by us but do not want to interfere so obviously. So they have fostered the idea of growing people for a while. Like in the movie Ultraviolet, where the people had to teach their clone self everything about them before they passed on so they could essentially still live on through their clones. But the clones' memories became foggy, and they forgot who they were, and then they lost sight of what they were even there for. And then there was that guy in the balloon that had everyone's memories on this huge database. But it just goes to show that life isn't meant to be permanent, but that civilizations grow and they go on, and genes slowly degrade over time. So there must be a reason why other aliens need genetic material from other places to keep their civilization going and not deplete the gene pool. There are drawbacks to cloning, but what seems to be most important is the mitochondrial DNA that comes from the mother. So maybe messing with genes is good, and maybe it's bad. Maybe that's how we became how we are now, and maybe we can fix it. We need a clear understanding of the implications and if we can really improve our species. But it seems like we are too much of a threat to be able to become superhuman yet. They will most likely want us to be good, obedient clones with no genitalia that listen to orders really well. So I guess whoever has the upper glove in the genetic area or the genetic arena could also keep the other species from rising up against their alien overlords while improving their genetics. Not a space race, but a species race. So those are some of my thoughts on this subject. And then there was this other article about Clonaid. So, whatever happened to baby Eve? When is a clone not a clone? Do you remember Dolly the sheep? If you were under the age of 30, probably not. So here's a refresher. In February 1997, A team of scientists at the University of Edinburgh announced that they had successfully cloned a 6-year-old fin-dorsed sheep, or Dorset, dolly, who was promoted in the press as the first cloned animal. Technically speaking, Dolly wasn't the first cloned animal. There had already been clones created through somatic cell transfer from embryonic stem cells, and by embryo splitting to create artificial twins. Dolly was the first clone created from an adult somatic cell, which is to say, not an embryonic stem cell, but a fully differentiated specialized cell from a mature individual. That is cloning as the general public understands it. The sort of cloning that gives us mid-list Michael Keaton comedies and interminably long Spider-Man stories. For several months, Dolly captured the public's imagination. Science fiction had suddenly become reality, and the future of biotechnology seemed limitless. Almost immediately, scientists began drafting plans to create the first human clone. In some circles, this was a cause for worry. It had taken the Scottish researchers some 277 attempts before they produced a single viable dolly. So, pretty low success rate. Many of the non-viable dollies also had serious birth defects, and there were signs that Dolly herself was suffering from premature aging and other conditions that might be related to cloning. There are also moral and ethical issues involving reproduction and sexual freedom, which we're not going into here, okay? So, Claude Vollhorn was born on December 30th, 1946, in the French village of Embert in Vichy. His mother was a 15-year-old peasant girl, and his father was a Jewish refugee hiding from the Nazis. A married Jewish refugee who abandoned his mistress and bastard once he realized his wife and legitimate children had survived the war. In 1961, Claude ran away from his Catholic boarding school and hitchhiked to Paris with a song in his heart. So Vollhorn pivoted to his first love, auto racing. At the peak of his pop career, he had paid his way through the Winfield Racing School, and soon he became a fixture on French racetracks. Unfortunately, he was the Johnny Dickshot of French auto racing. Talented enough to be on the track, but not talented enough to be serious competition. So he pivoted again, founding Autopop, a magazine devoted to cars and racing, which allowed him to stay on the periphery of the sport. It also gave him some stability in his life that he had been missing. Over the next few years, he married his girlfriend, nurse Marie Paul Christini, and had a daughter. Then the oil crisis hit. In November 1973, the French government enacted legislation to help the country weather the storm, which included gasoline rationing, lowering the national speed limit, and banning all motorsports. That put Claude Vollhorn in a tough spot. He was about to turn 27 and felt directionless. He had 3 failed careers behind him and no clear path to fame and fortune. He had developed a taste for a hard partying lifestyle that he could no longer afford to indulge in. His wife and child were starting to feel like chains binding him to a boring, gregarious respectability. On December 13th, Vollhorn decided to clear his head by going hiking in the Auvergne near Clermont-Ferrand. Deep in the mountains, he became aware of a bright light descending from the heavens and turned to see a spaceship landing beside him. A small humanoid popped out of the craft, 4 foot tall, with greenish skin, almond-shaped eyes, and neatly trimmed beard, and a small shining bubble around his head. The alien welcomed Vorhorn and told the young man he had been chosen to spread a message of peace and love and brotherhood to all mankind. Vorhorn went inside the alien spacecraft and spent 6 days reading the Bible, which the alien said is a true record of Earth's history, albeit one that had been obscured by mystical and futile sentences added to the text over the centuries. Earth, as it turns out, had been terraformed for hundreds of thousands of years by aliens known as the Elohim, who also seeded the planet with genetically engineered artificial life forms. Then, some 13,000 years ago, a scientist named Yahweh created intelligent life in the form of the first humans. This was a terrible crime to the Elohim, and Yahweh's rival Satan tried to correct it by bombing the planet with the atomic weapons. Fortunately, Yahweh saved all life on Earth by storing its genetic information on an ark in orbit around the planet. After this unfortunate incident, the Elohim had the sudden realization that they too were artificially created life forms. Instead of destroying their creations, they resolved to guide them to enlightenment through a series of appointed emissaries, including Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad, and now Claude Vorhorn. When mankind set off the first atomic bombs, it triggered the ultimate crisis for our species. Vorhorn was to guide humanity through this crisis by revealing the truth about our celestial origins and helping us to from our hearts. To reflect Vorhorn's new position, the Elohim bestowed upon him a new name, Rael, the bringer of light. In 1974, Rael published the story of his encounter in Le Livre qui dit la vérité, the book that tells the truth. He soon became a fixture of the French talk show circuit, enduring the mockery of countless television presenters, so he could use their shows as a forum to spread the message. Over the next several years, Rael published more books expanding his story. He discovered that the alien who contacted him was not only Yahweh, but also Claude's true father, making him Jesus' half-brother. He took a trip through space to the Elohim homeworld, where he had an orgy with sex robots and was tempted by Satan. He reveled the wonders that awaited humanity once it joined the galactic community, promising a world governed by infallible geniuses with the promise of eternal life for all, and also sex robots. In a relatively short time, these books became the founding text of a new religion, the International Raelian Movement. In some ways, Raelianism is fascinating, an atheistic religion that replaces God and the other supernatural with ancient aliens and super science, retaining the structure and narrative of mainstream Christianity while replacing its moral core with unfettered hedonism. In other ways, it's depressingly predictable, like its slow transformation into a cult of personality whose primary goal seems to helping the leader through his midlife crisis by surrounding him with nubile and sexually available young women, even though he looks like broken Matt Hardy wearing a samurai spacesuit made out of sweatpants. But today, we're not here to tear apart the UFO cult. and its founders weird sexual hang-ups, daddy issues, pathological needs to be uncritically adored. We're here to talk about human cloning, okay? So, in 1997, the international Raelian movement was in a precarious position. It had grown rapidly during its previous 2 decades, but the growth had plateaued due to several cult-adjacent scandals and increasing scrutiny from the public. Growing anti-cult sentiment in Europe had also driven the cult leaders out of France and across the Atlantic to Quebec. Their big evangelical project, a combination spaceport and embassy for the Elohim, had run into some insoluble obstacles. For symbolic reasons, the embassy had to be built in Israel, but for some reason, the chief rabbis did not seem well disposed to a fragile fringe religion that had chosen a swastika inside of a Star of David for its symbol. Then along came Dolly, and Rael saw an opportunity. Raelianism promised eternal life to its adherents, but in the absence of the supernatural, this was to be accomplished through a process involving cloning and memory transfer. This had seemed well beyond the capabilities of mere humans, but now we were almost halfway there. If the Raelians could put themselves on the forefront of human cloning, it would help legitimate them and spread their message. On March 11th, 1997, Rael held a press conference at the Las Vegas Flamingo Hilton to pronounce the formation of Valiant Ventures Ltd., an umbrella corporation that offered a whole suite of services related to human cloning and genetic engineering. Its subsidiaries included Ovulide, Insuraclone, Cloneaid, and Clonapet. You could even clone your pet. Oh yeah. Rael chose his most trusted Dr. Bridget Bossier to run Valiant Ventures. Bossier was a French chemist with multiple PhDs in physical and analytical chemistry from the University of Dijon and the University of Houston. She had joined the cult during a bitter divorce. The Raelians helped her get her groove back by making her feel sexually desirable. Her scientific mind and boundless ambition made her one of Rael's favorites, and she was quickly admitted to his inner circle. If there's anyone in the international Raelian movement who could make human cloning a reality, it was Dr. Bridget Bossier. She was about to have plenty of free time to work on the problem. Once her ties to the Raelians became public, her primary employer, Air Liquide, fired her from an assistant research director position. She would have to find somewhere else to do her research. Valiant Ventures was an off-the-shelf offshore company that Rael had purchased through mail order, little more than a tax ID number and a post office box in the Bahamas. Human cloning wasn't illegal in the Bahamas, but the country wasn't happy about the negative publicity it was receiving and quickly revoked the company's charter. That didn't slow the Raelians down, though. They continued to solicit customers for their suite of cloning services. Their suite of very expensive cloning services. Insuraclone charged subscribers $175 per year. Ovulade sold ova for $5,000 a pop, and the full Clonaid service cost over $200,000. High prices were not a deterrent. Soon the Raelians had a list of over 250 individuals who were interested in creating a human clone ranging from infertile and same-sex couples longing for children to I'm sure. I can't believe I've never seen this word. Decrepit millionaires who just wanted to live forever. So now that they had this list of potential customers, the Raelians did nothing. It turns out that most of those potential customers were waiting for someone else to make the first move. The Raelians were not equipped to make that move. They did not have an established cloning process, a fully equipped biotech lab or staff, only empty promises. So they did what they could do, which was nothing. 3 years later, in July 2000, the Raelians were approached by the parents of a 10-month-old baby boy who had died during routine surgery. In the months since he passed, they had become obsessed with the idea of getting their boy back in some way. They stumbled across the Clonaid website on the internet and reached out to Bossieler. They seemed like the perfect clients. They were normal people, not Raelians. They were flush with money from the malpractice suit filed after the boy's death and gladly plunked down $500,000 to help Bossieler start a new company, BioServe. They were even willing to sue if the state or federal government tried to shut Clonaid down. The only thing they insisted on was strict anonymity. Bossieler did not seem to understand the concept of strict anonymity because she immediately launched a public relations blitz to drum up more money. She awed the press by showing off a veritable army of Raelian surrogates, including her own daughter, which would enable BioServe and Clonaid to knock out rapid-fire cloning attempts in spite of the very low success rate. She also hinted that she was operating a secret cloning lab inside the United States, where a team of 3 specialists, a geneticist, a biochemist, and an obstetrician, were working on the project full-time. All this came as quite a shock to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which had assumed oversight over all cloning efforts inside the country's border. The agency sent a series of urgent notices to BioServe and Clonaid, demanding that they comply with the regulatory process, starting with the filing of an investigational new drug application. Clonaid representatives rather pointedly refused to respond, denying that the FDA had any jurisdiction over cloning. The conflict earned Rael and Bossieler's invitations to testify before the United States Congress as part of a panel on the ethics of cloning. Well, it earned Bossieler an invitation, and she refused to go unless Rael was also invited. At the hearings, the two presented a message tailor-made for their audience, framing cloning as a civil libertarian issue related to religious liberty and individual reproductive rights. They also stressed that no matter what steps Congress took, they could not be turned from their path, with Rael declaring, "Thankfully, nothing can stop science." Actually, it turned out one thing could stop science. A building manager in Nitro, West Virginia. He saw Bossieler on the news and recognized her as the woman to whom he was renting the gym of a decommissioned high school. He alerted the FDA, who raided the facility and discovered an unlicensed biotech laboratory. The FDA quickly realized that the lab was incapable of cloning a human being. It was sterile. The only equipment on hand were a few off-the-shelf computers, along with some microscopes and refrigerators. It was all just for show, to impress potential Clonaid clients with no background in science. Even so, the agency was keen to publicize the fact. that an illegal cloning lab was being run right under their noses. They offered Clonaid a deal. They would keep everything quiet as long as Raelians did everything above board from now on. The Raelians did not want that deal. They instead used the raid to generate more publicity, framing it as anti-scientific and a violation of their religious liberties. And they threatened to move their operations overseas, claiming to have opened secret Clonaid branches and offices and laboratories all over the world. Eventually, the dribs and drabs of this information leaking out of Nitro also allowed reporters to identify the hitherto anonymous clients. West Virginia State Legislator Mark Allen Hunt and his wife. The Hunts almost immediately withdrew their backing, but the controversy derailed Mark's political career. He later publicly slagged the Raelians as press hogs and got most of his money back. Say yes to human cloning. Rael and Bossiello kept soldiering on, though. In 2001, Clonaid loaned a South Korean science museum a prototype unit of the RMX 2010, their proprietary embryonic cell fusion system. It caused quite a stir because no one had any idea what the heck it was supposed to do, even after reading numerous press releases and purported documentation. And the Raelians refused any attempts to disassemble and examine the machine. Rael followed that up with some publication of Say Yes to Cloning. Yes, that's a book that he made about cloning. To say that he leaned into the controversy, and that it would be a tremendous understatement. The first chapter starts off calling anyone against cloning a neo-Neanderthal and declaring if they are agents against human cloning and eternal life, then let them die. The book is largely concerned with brushing away the objections to cloning with glib generalizations. In some cases, Rael has a point. Sure, cloning isn't natural, but lots of things aren't natural. No, you can't replace a dead child with a clone, but people try to do it the old-fashioned way all the time. And the jury was still out as to whether clones would be monsters or have shortened lifespans. But for the most part, Rael's arguments were weak. They are not the thoughts of someone thoughtfully engaged with the topic, but someone responding to attacks on his philosophy with callous knee-jerk arguments. Particularly bizarre is his enthusiastic embrace of genetic engineering, when he argues that genetically engineered children will be happier because their parents have already chosen its interest before birth and will tailor their lives to that interest. Well, that sounds like Gattaca right there. What's telling through is how Rael chooses to frame the accompaniments of Clonaid to date, not as scientific achievements, but as public relations coup for which he deserves all the credit, but none of the responsibility. In August 2001, Rael Bossiello and several other French scientists interested in cloning were invited to a symposium on human cloning held by the National Academy of Sciences. The Academy hoped to scare them straight with horror stories from scientists who had been working in animal cloning, and it backfired spectacularly. Bossiello deflected tough questions about her process and methods with answers that were technically and scientifically meaningless, but which were delivered confidently. The other scientists at the event weren't fooled, but the press was, and it uncritically reported Bossieller's claims as if they were fact. In February 2002, Clonaid announced that they had found a new client, a rich Israeli businessman with a terminal illness who wanted to clone to carry on in his stead after his death. The Raelians were happy to make his money and turn it into their labs, and also perfectly happy to downplay the fact that a clone would have his genetics but not his personality or memory. By the middle of the year, competitors began to emerge in the race to clone the first human. On the serious side, Advanced Cell Technologies announced that they had created clone human embryos from adult cells, but had not allowed them to develop into blastocasts, or whatever. On the crackpot side, Italian gynecologist Dr. Severino Antinori, also known as Mr. Miracle, for helping a 62-year-old woman conceive, announced that he expected to produce a successful human clone in just under a year. On December 27, 2002, Rael and Bossieller had a press conference in Florida. They announced that Clonaid customer had given birth to the first successful human clone. The customer was a 31-year-old American Jew woman whose husband was sterile, and she had sought Clonaid's assistance after countless rounds of futile fertility treatments. She provided the cell samples and over herself and carried the embryo to term without the use of a Clonaid surrogate. The child was born at 11:55 a.m. on December 25th and was a healthy baby girl named Eve. Bossiella revealed that Clonaid had already produced 10 pregnancies, though 5 of those were miscarried in the first month. Eve was the first successful birth, but they expected to produce 4 more clone babies by the end of February. Bossiella provided absolutely nothing to back her statements. There was no baby, no parents, no DNA, no medical charts, no raw data, no testimony from Clonaid doctors or technicians. She provided no information about where Eve was born, save that it was in the United States. She wouldn't even narrow down which time zone it was in. She did promise that there would be more data to come. To that end, Clonaid recruited Dr. Michael Gullion, science editor for the ABC News, to test and verify their claims. Gullion was currently in the process of putting their team together of independent world-class experts to conduct the tests. On December 31st, family court lawyer Bernard Siegel filed a suit in Broward County Circuit Court looking to have a judge appointed a special guardian for baby Eve, claiming Clonaid was trying to exploit the clone for publicity purposes and keeping it from any medical specialist who could give it the monitoring and treatments its unusual condition might need. Siegel was a meddling busybody who had absolutely no connection to Eve, but he kinda had a point. Clonaid spokesman responded by claiming that mother and child had left the United States for Israel. On January 9th, Michael Gullion announced that due to a complete lack of cooperation and communication from Clonaid and its representatives, he would no longer be involved in testing their claims. He claimed it is entirely possible Clonaid's announcement is part of an elaborate hoax intended to bring publicity to the Raelian movement. Dun dun dun. So what did happen to that baby Eve? Nobody really knows. Was it a hoax? Was it all a sham? I don't know. I'll have to find out on next episode of The Cosmic Revelation.